Good morning, everyone. Some it's very, very good morning. We have a couple folks in different time zones here. Um, but welcome to the session, How Fair Can You Be? Is it SWOT or SWOT? Analysis of domain-specific institutional and generalist repositories. So all of you hopefully can see the notes document in Kiko chat. You should be able to type into it. Feel free to put your name down and affiliation and where you are. You'll be able to see the agenda, well, the description and any resources listed. So I guess without further ado, well, yes, also please feel free to write in chat. That will be any questions and comments will be captured at the end that aren't in the document. Um, and so I think who is going to share their screen? Is it Shelley? All right, so Shelley, go ahead and share, and I'll spotlight you. And you're currently muted.
That's okay. I'm sharing, but I'm not speaking. So don't spotlight me.
Oh, okay. I won't.
Okay, I'll start. So welcome everyone. This is a meeting of the CopDesk cluster. Could we do the first slide? We have what I'm going to call a participatory agenda. After the introductions, we're going to give you the background to CopDesk. We're also thrilled to announce that we got a community fellow, and we'd very much like him to introduce himself. And then we're going to do a deep dive where we're trying to look at domain versus generalist repositories, capture the takeaways. But again, we're kind of so thrilled that we've got our new community fellow that we thought we'd just give you an introduction on what we plan to do in this cluster for the rest of the year, and give you a heads up on what we want to do, and with then a final wrap up. Next slide, please. So next one. Okay, so just welcome. Please, I've put the notes in the chat. Please put your name and affiliation, location in it. Ask questions verbally or in chat. And please mute during presentations. And again, that's the link to the notes. Next slide, please. So this really is just a spin-off from the session that we had in July, where the topic was a decade of fair data, what we have achieved. And we discussed that when you look into it, few data sets were fully fair compliant, whether they're a data set that's prepared for publication or whether it's just a data set available from a repository. And as I keep pointing out, one of the things that inhibits achieving the true fairness is whether or not in the I2 principle is that the vocabularies themselves must be fair, and which means the vocabularies have to be available online with metadata, etc. And as we all know, not all that many are. So we then got into, because CopDesk, as Kirsten will tell you, is about connecting publishers with researchers, with editors, getting into that ecosystem. And we were arguing, of course, that some of the generalist repositories cannot really enforce fair because they can't do the domain-specific standards. But we was asked if we could consider working with general repositories and moving through facilitating, promoting, and eventually enforcing some standardization to community-agreed profiles. So with that in mind, could you do the next slide, please, Kelly? So next slide. Oh, sorry, I've missed what the session goals are. So sorry, it's a mix up with one of my slides. Our session, no, I didn't. I copied and pasted. Sorry, it's my fault. I'll fix this up, but just leave it there. So what we want to do in this session is kind of explore and understand better this relationship between generalist and repositories and domain repositories. So what we thought we'd do now is just do a segue, and I'll pass over now to Bobby to introduce himself so you know our community fellow. So over to you, Bobby.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Shelley, I had a couple slides. If you want to just share again, um, right where we picked off.
Yeah, sure. No problem.
Thank you so much. Oh, spotlighted and everything. I'll wait till I have my pictures and info to show. There we go. Perfect. Yeah. So thank you again for the introduction, Leslie. My name is Bobby Saba. I apologize for the recycling of slides if you're at the plenary yesterday morning, but a little bit about me. I am originally from Mansfield, Massachusetts, so right outside of Boston. As most people in the field of atmospheric sciences had a love for the weather from a really young age and ventured up into northern Vermont, where I pursued a bachelor's degree in atmospheric sciences from what used to be called Northern Vermont University, Linden. Some folks may know it as Linden State College. After graduation in 2022, I moved out here to Norman, Oklahoma, and got my master's degree in meteorology, finished that up in 2024. That led me to where I am now. So I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Oklahoma in the School of Meteorology. Now, my special thesis coming over to Norman, no shocker if you know the area, is supercell and tornado dynamics. And as a part of that, I have had the privilege of collaborating with our federal partners over at NOAA and the National Severe Storms Laboratory, both on research, but also in collaborative field efforts. And so this has been one of the highlights of my graduate school years. And these pictures on the right show you just how much fun we have out in the field. One of those pictures, we may have broken an instrument, but it's all right. It ended up okay. And then that picture there on the bottom right is us in the field this past summer. And I'll get to some of the really cool data that we've been able to collect here in a second. So next slide, please. So I mentioned that, my specialty area is in supercell and tornado dynamics, and I wanted to take a minute and just talk a little bit about my personal research experience. When I came out to Norman in 2022, I picked up a master's thesis project on observed wind profile evolution in plane supercell environments. And so with this project, we worked heavily with Doppler wind LiDAR observations in supercell environments, and it was just a really great opportunity to dive into the world of observations and kind of get into what some raw observational data looks like. Picking up kind of right where we left off with the LiDAR observations, one of the really cool things is we can use it for a whole variety of applications. And we actually started utilizing it for more boundary layer observations and specifically vorticity observations and supercell inflow to get a better idea of what these vorticity profiles are like in supercell inflow environments. Now, this leads me to my dissertation, where I've had the privilege of actually kind of switching gears a little bit from observations into more high resolution numerical simulations. And this has really been a great introduction to high performance computing and big data, where my research now focuses on supercell evolution in the Southeast US and taking environments that we typically find there and taking a look at tornado processes, things like tornado genesis, how we get tornadoes, and if it differs from what we at least think we know about supercells and tornadoes out here in the Great Plains. But I haven't quite ditched observations for good. I've been a part of the LiDAR team, even continuing through my dissertation research. And over the last few years, we've pivoted a lot to, tornado observations. And so we've actually taken our Doppler wind LiDAR into the field with the goal of scanning tornadoes themselves and scanning those tornadic vortices. So this screen capture here on the right is supposed to be an animation, so I do apologize for that, but is what we like to consider the first ever tornado scan with Doppler wind LiDAR. This team, we've been working together for a few years now. We've really honed in our craft, and we've had the opportunity to collect some really revolutionary data, and we are super excited for what this is going to be, not only for us, but for the rest of the field. Next slide, please. So over the next year, I think I have a lot of personal and professional goals, but first and foremost, I'm really excited to engage and learn more about data publishing through the CopDesk collaboration group. My term as a ESIP fellow just started here back in December, so I'm really looking forward to jumping in over the next few weeks as I really start to dive in past this meeting and working with the crew. But for me, it's not a successful fellowship if I'm not able to take, the skills that I learn here through this fellowship and with the CopDesk crew back to the building. We do a lot of field work. We are no strangers to observational data and, a plethora of data sets. And I think for us, it's a really big area of improvement where we can make sure that the data sets we're publishing, we're publishing everything as it's supposed to be for the broader community. So I'm really excited to be translating the knowledge into better data practices here in the building. But kind of outside of ESIP, I'm really excited to continue to spread the science to the community. I mentioned fieldwork, and one of the really exciting things about fieldwork is how interesting it is to the outside and to the general public. And so, all the time, these pictures on the right here kind of show it, how many interactions we really have when we're out in the field. It's hard to drive through small town America with these kind of trucks and not really expect questions or conversations. And, communicating to the public is one of the things I really do love about this job. Fieldworks provides that opportunity, and I'm really excited to continue to do that here over the next few months. So that'll do it for me. I'm really excited to join the team. Thank you all for listening to me kind of yap about myself a little bit. So I will turn it back over to you guys.
Okay, just Shelley, can you, sorry about this, people, but can you refresh the slides, please?
Absolutely. Sounds like we might have had an update.
Yes.
Yep.
Stand by.
It was a
Bobby.
slide missing. Yeah.
Bobby, that was
Yeah.
really, really cool. I can't imagine the rush it must be to be in the middle. And that first LiDAR picture of a tornado, I was down in the with the pixel level, my nose was against the screen trying to understand. So I just love it to death. Okay, I'm hitting refresh twice just to make sure I didn't miss anything. And
Very lucky to do what I do. So
oh, so cool. Thank you. I'm so glad you're part of the team. Okay, folks.
Okay, so Bobby, now next slide. No, go back one, please. Back one. Otherwise, if this, there we are. Okay, so just I found the slide on the session goals, and again, CopDesk is about ensuring that when a data set is when a paper is published, that the data that goes with the paper is also made accessible. And so in that context, we want to compare them and the degree of fairness, raise awareness of researchers of some of the limitations on what's with the generalist repositories, but again, respecting what people were saying at the last meeting, that the actual degree of fairness required can determine which repository type. And so there's starting to be a feeling that at all costs, our primary data sets have to be properly preserved and be fully fair and be in a repository that can enforce the relevant domain standards required by FAIR. But often with, as you know, with a publication, there's a data set that you have that's, a highly evolved product. It's just a highly evolved interpretation of existing primary data. And are they the ones where we don't necessarily have to enforce, the fully fair requirements? And so probably we're putting the cart before the horse. We should have let Kirsten go first, but Kirsten will now talk to you about what CopDesk is really aiming for. So let's go on to Kirsten's slides now, please.
Yeah, thanks. I think I see new names in the list of attendees. Maybe people could just put in to the chat if they attending CopDesk for the first time. I just wanted to provide an overview for those who may not be familiar with Coptis yet or are interested where we're actually coming from. And so yeah, there we go. Some for the first time. So we really hopefully can give you a bit of background, how Coptis was created and how it has evolved. So Coptis really started in 2014. So it's over 10 years old now. And I think it's always important to look back and say when Coptis started, it was a different world for data management than we have today. Data policies, data management plans, and open data sharing policies were only really just emerging. 2011 and 2013 were the first two big White House memos that triggered a lot of activities. NSF had started data management plan mandates in 2011. Generalist repositories were being launched. So Zenodo was actually launched the year that Coptis also started to exist. DOIs were also just sort of in their infancies. DOI for data. DataSite was founded in 2009, so there were a few years, but it was not completely common across repositories. FAIR principles didn't even exist yet, and the registries of repositories were also just emerging. So the landscape was quite different than today. Next slide, please. So at the time, I was already running a repository for geochemistry data, and we had, with multiple repositories, we had started an effort to talk to publishers and specifically editors of those journals to ensure that data documentation was more consistent, more complete, and so on. And that basically led to Coptis. The rationale for building this connection between the data repositories and publishers was clearly that, scholarly publication was the main way of sharing data at the time, the way for researchers to make their data available if they were the size of something that fits into a publication or into an electronic supplement. And because of that structure and documentation and so on, the data that were submitted along with publications to a publisher, to a journal, were often very heterogeneous and very difficult to discover and reuse. Again, FAIR did not exist at the time, those principles. And we clearly agreed with the publishers that domain repositories are the ones that do curation, that provide quality standards, and can work with the community on data best practices, and so really make sure that the data are in good shape. Next slide. And when we founded Coptis, it was really this recognition of the higher level policy that we wanted to influence. So in this world of data and publications, we have a lot of researchers, we have editors, in a smaller number, but then an even smaller number of publishers. And we felt that if we influence policy at the highest level, it can multiply down this pyramid, trying to convince every researcher in discussions seemed to be a little too ambitious and unrealistic. Next slide, please. So in 2014, we held a workshop at the AGU headquarters that was funded by the National Science Foundation and moderated brilliantly by Joel Kutscher-Gerschenfeld. It had about 70 participants, publishers, editors, funders, agencies, and obviously lots of repositories there that discussed, how the interaction between publishers and repositories should work, where the benefits were, and so on. So next slide. I'm not sure. So the outcomes were that we actually created Coptis, but there was agreement that it would be a permanent international coordinating forum, an exchange between publishers and data facilities or consortia and so on. And it would have a very loose structure. We wanted to more clearly define what the structure of this coalition would be, but it ended up just being really a discussion forum for many years. An important outcome of the first workshop was that we started to draft a statement of commitment that we put out there for signatures by both repositories and publishers, and ultimately also agencies and so on signed this up. And the most important sentence from that really was that Earth and space science data should, to the greatest extent possible, be stored in appropriate domain repositories that follow leading practices and can provide additional data services. So it clearly recognized the value of domain repositories over more general repositories or institutional repositories. Next slide, please. Next slide. We had a second workshop that was funded by the Sloan Foundation, which we held at the headquarters of publisher Wiley, which was really important to bring a more international, if not, it wasn't quite a global community into the discussion. And this has stayed until today. We are an international group that keeps meeting at conferences such as AGU, and we regularly also have our meetings at the European Geoscience Union. Next slide. So what we discussed over time, it evolved from really focusing on guidelines for journals to make their data policies kind of more consistent. We actually drafted a data policy for journals that they could adopt and modify as needed. We also started to create a data repository directory with certain selection criteria that was ultimately merged with Re3 data. And we also started around 2016 to think about guidelines for data citation and really realized the challenges. And out of that was born the Enabling Fair Data project that was executed through AGU with a broad community participating in that. It created another commitment statement for publishers and repositories and others that was much more specific for the implementation of the fair data policies, which at the time had emerged. Since 2020, we have focused on trying to resolve pain points that have come up in fair data guidelines and workflows and so on. One of the areas we have been focusing really on were data citations and the workflows, the coordination of workflows at publishers and at the repositories, which is causing a bit of headaches, I think specifically at the repositories. So these have been a lot of great discussions, a lot of great exchange that has led to more consistent procedures and so on. And it also led to an RDA working group that is led by Danny Kincaid, Repo to Pub. If you have not seen that, it specifically focuses on this coordination between the repositories and the journals to ensure the data submission and manuscript submission processes are somehow aligned and made consistent. Next slide. So I mentioned most of these, the successes that Coptis has had. I mean, we've kept the dialogue between publishers and editors going for over 10 years now. The 2 statements of commitment have been widely endorsed. The Enabling Fair Data project came out of it. In 21, we ran an editor workshop webinar series, and I mentioned the working group. So we can just move on to the next slide. The whole organization of Coptis has clearly also evolved. It was founded as an informal and volunteer-driven initiative that was a clear decision at the workshop in 2014. There is no charter, there is no formal governance, any election of a steering committee and so on. So it is an executive committee that has just gotten together over time and has been running the meetings here at the ESIP winter and summer meetings and meetings in between since 2023 on a monthly basis. But it is a bit of a challenge, and I think it remains a discussion in our meetings how to continue. We continue to have in-person meetings at AGU and EGU if ever possible. Okay, next slide. So we've in the last meeting, we actually checked in also in, should we continue with in the research data management community and from the publishers continued interest in Coptis and a wish to continue going with it. But we see, and this is something that Shelley often has in her presentations, there is this rapid growth of use of generalist repositories as compared to domain repositories. And that is clearly a big concern for all of us who put a lot of work into ensuring fair data, high quality of data. But we also are challenged these days, I think, most of the domain repositories with resilience and sustainability, with, funding cuts, with all kinds of cyber attacks, with whatever risk repositories have to face and prepare for. So the discussion has come up again. Is there a benefit in leveraging the capabilities and capacity of these generalist repositories with that of the domain repositories? So that is what we want to focus on today. The reality check, there are other issues such as we have limited international participation, and that is in part due to the fact that we are in a US organization, ESIP, even though ESIP does have quite a bit of international participation, but specifically the South is not well represented. It is also by being part of ESIP, the participation of editors and publishers has decreased in the ongoing virtual meetings, it's still doing pretty well at the in-person meetings at conferences. And yeah, lack of resources is always the issue with volunteer efforts, and that explains why sometimes the meetings are being canceled, and we're really looking for some more participation from everybody who is on here. Okay, next slide. I think I'm now. We could use this as the in some way as an intro now to our discussion of the what we wanted to do, the SWOT analysis, an analysis of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to the collaboration between generalist repositories and domain repositories. We have a lot of challenges, I think, with the domain repositories in basically scaling the infrastructure, scaling the services to a growing volume of data. And I have to say that just today, in one of the repositories I'm operating, I had somebody complain that we couldn't accept the data they were trying to submit because it was 10 gigabyte files, and said they just going to submit it now to Dryad and not to our domain repository. So it's disappointing, but it's the reality. And so we really want to hear from everybody who is here today what you're thinking about, a closer connection between generalist repositories and domain repositories. Is it actually a bad idea for domain repositories to do a step and work with generalist repositories? Could it mean that they ultimately giving up more control over data quality, or are there opportunities actually for more sustainability, for more resilience, for the persistent data access, and so on? I think we can get through the next slides rapidly and move into that. Yeah, I think, Shelley, we can just move on to the SWOT analysis, right?
Okay, well, thanks, Kirsten. Just before we go on, we decided to get Kirsten to do that rundown of the history of CopDesk because we had a feeling we might get quite a few new people who didn't really know what CopDesk is. But as Kirsten has said, it is the interaction between publishers, editors, repositories, and of course researchers, because they're the ones that produce the data. And it's an unusual combination that does have, what can I say, a place finding a home where all those groups meet together. And we haven't really yet found an association or group that has it. And at least within ESIP, we do connect with Earth Sciences, and there are quite a few repository groups now through the CDF cluster that come to ESIP. So that's partly why we're here. So to do the SWOT, again, if we could go back to the notes, in case you're there. I'll just put them in the chat again. So if people could go into the notes and you can see, I don't know what page it is because I've got the yellow highlight, and what we thought we'd do is now just everyone start putting in what they feel the strengths and weaknesses are of domain and generalist repositories. And we could also chat while you're doing that. I guess what the other thing is, I should have actually asked is, does anyone have any questions they would like to ask of Kirsten, so that, or Shelley, so that you, if you have any doubts. Yeah, thanks for going to the meeting notes. Does anyone have any questions?
Or comments? We don't need to do it all just in writing in the document or in the chat, where we really want this to be an interactive meeting, and discussion would be really appreciated. So if you don't have comments here anywhere that identify strengths or weaknesses and opportunities for domain repository versus generalist repository, but if you have ideas about how would a collaboration between generalist repositories and domain repositories make everybody stronger, make the data better, that would be great to hear. Where are the risks of working with each other? So, don't necessarily get scared with these categories that we have just provided in this document. I think type in whatever you feel.
All participants should be able to raise their hand. I think you can do that through the React button if you don't want to just blurt out, but you can type in chat, type in the document, raise your hand, all that good stuff.
Carl. Hey
sure.
there.
Yeah. Thanks. And I think, this is an interesting and useful exercise for trying to figure out the niches and complementary roles that the disciplinary and general purpose repositories can fill. But I wonder if there's sort of an additional overlay in terms of the different incentives and interests of the participants. This was certainly a dynamic that came out in the interactions that we were having at UNM with our researchers across the board in terms of their degree of engagement in the data documentation, preservation, preparation for preservation, where many researchers who are producing data, there's probably as much or as much incentivized by the requirement that they do so, but not necessarily by what benefits they may see from the effort that they expend. So as a result, the general purpose repositories, as they typically have a somewhat more lightweight submission process, review process, and documentation requirements, basically translating into a lower level of effort to get to the end point where they can say, yes, I have put my data into a repository and here's the DOI for it. My work here is done, which is a different incentive than the community interest in well-documented, well-structured, more powerfully accessible data that are typically available through disciplinary repositories. So I think we're potentially seeing a tension between the community interests and individual interests for the folks that are creating the data sets. And it varies disciplinarily as well, where disciplines that have seen community benefits and the necessity of access to well-structured, well-documented shared data typically tend to invest more and use the disciplinary repositories more because they're both using and contributing to those repositories, and there's higher value in their effort and greater rewards in their productivity and recognition within their disciplines, if it's a discipline that has a greater tradition of sharing and reuse and citation. So I think part of the complexity of trying to identify strengths and weaknesses is from the perspective of whom. When we talk about strengths of general purpose repositories, for some researchers, a strength of general purpose repositories is a lightweight metadata model that does not place great demands on the submitter. Where that may be a weakness from the perspective of the community of potential users of those data. So I'm just thinking of that as an overlay in terms of from what perspective are we talking about the SWOT elements? Just to complicate things.
No, good. Absolutely. We need to take that into account. But I think obviously I'm looking at it is from the repository perspective. And I think what I would like to learn are the different perspectives that in the end tell me, is it valuable to work with a generalist repository, or are there threats if, I do that, ultimately funders step back and say, oh, well, you're using the generalist anyway, so why are you there? Where can we find a balance between the the benefits and the threats? Yeah. Whoops, I had the.
Yeah. Thanks, Carl, for your contribution. I think you're right. I think what we're fighting, or not fighting, or the tension is, I want to get my data set published. Give me a DOI. Where's the quickest place I can get it? Versus understanding the longer term implications and, do researchers care? They like their science to be quoted and cited, but understanding the value of their data sets being foundational and reused by other groups. And in order to do that, we do need a lot more metadata attached to the data so we can trust it and reuse it. And that's, I think, the tension between doing it quickly versus doing it for the longer term. So, Beth, sorry, I don't know someone's got their hand up. Would you like to go ahead, please?
Yeah, sorry, my name I forgot to change. Doesn't have Sean Smith there, just has my acronym. Yeah, I think it's interesting. This conversation is, with the whole Coptis, which I'm kind of new to, but learned about a little bit more about today. One of the things that evidently has happened is almost potentially a not expected consequence of the effort to connect data to publication. We have gotten the publishers, to say, okay, you want to publish this article, your data has to be someplace we can find it. And the unintended consequence there is now people just throw it wherever they can to get a DOI so they can get their paper published, as opposed to putting it in a robust, archive or domain deposit repository. So I don't know what we can do I think the question is what can be done to streamline getting the data into the trusted repositories. I'm not saying that these other repositories aren't necessarily trusted, but the domain specific repositories to hopefully make researchers go that way instead of generalist.
Jelly, you want to go? I would like to say something too. I just can't find my hand anymore.
Yeah, I just for a moment. So I completely agree with what I think it was Sean. I think I agree with what Sean said. So, Shelley Stahl, I work at AGU. We have our journals, and yes, absolutely, unintended consequences. The journal is not the place where the researcher should get recommendations for the best possible repository. You all should be telling the journals what to say. So there is work for that. So yes, I completely agree that at the time of publication is not when you make the decision on which repository to use. And that actually, I don't know if Danny feels like talking about Repo to Pub, but that is literally what Repo to Pub project is that particular angle to get you to have preferred repositories and make those relationships long before you start publishing. And that I think would help.
Yeah. But I think it takes a village, right? So it could be, it's a culture change and it's a culture shift for researchers to begin to think about the data publication first in support of the scholarly publication. It's not the way it happens currently. They get directed by the journals currently. And some journals have lists, some journals don't have lists, some journals have criteria. And then the requirements and timing of those requirements for the journals beyond just where you've put it. But do you need a DOI? Do you need a DAS, a data availability statement? At what point in their workflow? What happens if the data need to be edited? Is there embargo allowed? All these types of questions on the intersection between the data publication and the scholarly publication is really what the working group is trying to get a handle on. And we're currently doing interviews of both repository managers and both publishers and editors on their pain points and workflows, so we can get a better handle on the breadth of and scope of this issue. But I think there are inroads that can be made, and I think we're getting there. The journals are asking for help, but there are long-standing, they can't make change rapidly, and there are long-standing policies that have been developed and in place for quite a while, and I think that'll be challenging to move. What we're also finding out is open science individuals within publishers and even individual journals, they're all over the place. Their requirements, their policies are all over the place. Getting them to unify is going to be challenging, but maybe getting them to adopt certain across-the-board recommendations is achievable. So that's where we're working at sort of that level. But I think it does take a village, because even in the face of changing publisher and journal, even down to the journal public, editorial policies, it's still going to take a while before researchers realize that they shouldn't be going at the time of manuscript submission to be worrying about their data. And so that message needs to come from the repository, from the funder, from the journal. That pushing that culture change, I think, is really what needs to happen over these small little incremental wins. Everything helps.
Carl, to answer the question, or my perspective on the value proposition for publishers, I mean, we have been working in my domain in geochemistry with publishers, and they actually see the benefit that the data themselves is more reviewed in these repositories. And again, that's one of the strengths of the domain repositories, that they do work with the community to define best practices and then implement them. Reviewers and editors feel overwhelmed with reviewing the data, so they're happy to hand that task over. Increasingly, I think I hear from repositories that researchers use the repository to find data and then the papers. I mean, one of the databases is GeoRock being huge, with thousands of publications being compiled. And people go there and say, what papers have data for this particular region? And so you actually can use the repositories to advertise the papers. So that's just something that's coming at the moment, I think.
And sort of that's what I was curious about and trying to probe with that question is, what is, how does the repository recommendation fit into the let's just say the business model of a publisher, and in terms of driving traffic, distributing the workload in terms of review, thinking of those things that make the life of publishers easier, either in terms of the volunteer workforce that they're tapping into in terms of their reviewers, but also the ongoing overhead that they take on for the long-term maintenance of access to data. That was sort of what I was trying to learn more about.
And surprisingly, we've even had, in the context of talking about sustainability and so on, we had one publisher say, well, we should really pay you. Unusual.
But that's an explicit recognition that this is something that that repositories require funds to do their work, and they require sustainable support because it's a long-term commitment, and the publishers may very easily recognize that that's not a business that they necessarily want to be in terms of the long-term support of data storage versus the very predictable and lower level of sustained access to publications. Those are two vastly different demands on their resources, and being able to outsource that, even at some marginal cost, may be highly attractive. But thinking about it in terms of the calculus that a publisher may use in figuring out what is the value proposition of a generalist versus disciplinary repository, and what is the cost and the return on that investment to a publisher. Because ultimately, at the very least, they all have to have a business model of some sort, whether it's a profitable one or purely a sustainability one. There's an underlying business model that they have to take into account.
Yeah. I'm really glad to see how the document fills with lots of really, really amazing comments. I think we should dedicate probably our next monthly session to synthesizing what people contributed here. It's really cool, and I already saw something where I'm like, yeah, that's actually like a really good thing that I haven't myself thought about.
Yes, keep populating it. You're doing brilliantly.
Yep.
We didn't quite know if this would work, and there was a bit of tension as to how to set it up, but I think we've hit the sweet spot. Shelley, do you want to make any comments as a chair?
I am really keen as well. I'm typing. You're all motivating this really interesting discussion. I was looking at the opportunities for both domain repositories and also generalist repositories. I think they're so if you could all think about that. I was typing one. You can see where I have a ... I'll come back after I talk a little bit. I think we should also be really keen on threats. there's actions happening in the US right now at the administration level that are challenging in many ways. And sometimes I'm a glass half full girl. So taking a threat and turning it into an opportunity is something I'm really keen about. So I'm looking, I wrote this very last one under generalist repository. The one that's highlighted is the one I just wrote. And I want to just say something really out loud for you to consider. The trust we put in our repositories has value to our community. And I remember when I first joined AGU, which some of you will remember was a long time ago, just over 10 years. I remember we had some researchers that were really concerned about using government-funded repositories because they didn't feel the government could be trusted. This was 10 years ago. And I didn't fully understand that until time went by, and then it was really clear. So we have that, and a domain repository is both supported by an institution through grants from the government, as well as being a line item in a government budget, such as NOAA and NASA and such. And thank you, everybody. And you pause, and I want to talk about generalist repositories. I've spent a lot of time working with them. If you look at the generalist repository comparison chart, that was an outcome from a workshop that I co-led many, many years ago on behalf of NIH. And one of the reasons we wanted to create that chart, Marianne Martone and I, with the leadership of those generalist repositories, is we really wanted to uncover what you need to pay attention to in a generalist repository. First of all, they're not all the same. This particular session is being recorded, so I will talk generally instead of specific because I don't want to say I have favorites, but I do have favorites. And I come to that very logically. So if you're a commercial generalist repository, then your motivations are to the people who are invested in your organization as a commercial entity and not to research directly. Now, that doesn't mean they're not supporting research. It just means their motivations are different. So you should pay attention to that. So on that chart, you can figure out, let's pick on Mendeley. They're the easiest one to pick on. Sorry, Elsevier, but Elsevier owns them. And they will push for their data to be in Mendeley. If you publish it in an Elsevier journal, which I think you should think twice about doing, but nonetheless, they have some excellent journals. And there are a number of them that I find myself being asked to review for, and that is not something I have time to do. And the Mendeley system is an excellent system. But when you put your data there, thanks, Leslie, you have to make a choice. So I would say, go with a not-for-profit that's well-funded. And in that chart, we tried to make sure you understood what well-funded means. The Gray Community Generalist Repository Ecosystem Initiative, funded by NIH. Those folks got a lot of money to work together. And so they've actually been able to get common services all the way across that spreadsheet to their credit. Now, I won't hold back. The folks at NIH know how annoyed I am that they gave money to generalist repositories and not domain, not their health. This would be health domain. Here's the bugaboo on that. They could do that. They could give money to the generalist repositories. They're already, just like NSF repositories, they're already giving money to their domain repositories. And it actually was a barrier for them to then also fund for them to work together. So these are like the constructs we build around our communities also impact how we're able to work together. It was self-populated, but I did edit it. Yeah, Marianne and I both edited it. This last version 4, was lightly edited. I'll let you know, I didn't have a whole lot of time. So yeah, they didn't get to say whatever they wanted to in the first 3 versions, but the 4th one is very heavily their voice. It was okay. I looked at it very quickly. It was okay. It didn't have a whole lot of harm in it. But Marianne and I did edit the first 3 versions, and they just put the 4th one out. They're very organized, and it's all right. It's fine. If you see something that you're concerned about, do let me know. I can add friction to the discussion. But it would be really interesting for us to do. I'm not saying the domain repository should create something like this. I'm not sure that makes sense because we are so unique. Each is unique. AGU doesn't have their own domain repository. So when I say we, I embed myself in your community. But it would be really interesting to talk about, what is a threat? Like, for instance, it takes time to get a data set into a domain repository that also is providing enough curation for interoperability to happen, right? So if that is the case, then we also need to help the researchers understand the value of doing that and doing it early. And that's something that we're not doing a good job on. That's something, okay, I waxed poetic. Back over to you, Leslie.
Does anyone, you still seem to be adding, and we've still got 23 people in the place, so I guess we're going. If Does anyone else have a comment? Because if not, I guess seeing you here, and as we've all admitted, as you all admitted, not many of you know much about CopDesk. Danny, I was just wondering whether you'd like to just give a quick introduction to the Repo to Pub group and what you're doing there, because that's part of this, and the Repo to Pub kind of spun off this group. And while you're doing it, I'll look up the website for it.
I put the website in earlier.
Okay.
The RDA landing page site for Repo to Pub. But really broadly, I don't have any slides prepped, but broadly, the group came together actually for years ago through CDF, when my repository, which is a disciplinary oceanographic repository, was experiencing problems in the way of bottlenecks when very frantic researchers under duress are coming to request same-day service for large data sets that underpin their scholarly publication because they've already submitted the manuscript and they're at a point where they need a DOI. And we perform really deep level of curation, as close to fair as we feel. We're pretty robust, and it takes a long time to do this level of curation, and it takes a lot of participation from the data submitter. So the fact that we were getting multiple requests to sort of jump in our already growing queue was really hamstringing our ability to get work done. And I brought this to the CDF, and other folks, the Council of Data Facilities, and other folks said they were experiencing the same problem. It was about that time that the RDA group, the Earth, Space, and Environmental Sciences interest group, was kind of rallying people around common issues in this data space. And so I brought it to RDA, and other people were interested in this. And so we started a working group to reach out to publishers, and that's when it became really relevant that it should really be a CopDesk focused, sort of effort. And we've been leveraging CopDesk as a forum to reach publishers quite a bit. But the gist of this is to get a better handle on the workflows of the disciplinary repositories, the workflows of the both publishers and editors, which they all have different lenses, to Carl's point. And the editors are overwhelmed with trying to figure out how to review the data that underpins the scholarly publication. And many of the reviewers aren't trained. It falls on editorial roles. It's a big challenge. And so we started trying to get a better handle on what the landscape looks like, both from disciplinary repositories, and then the publishing side through a series of focused interviews with pointed questions. We're in the process of wrapping that up right now. Once we start analyzing the output of that with the working group, we'll be able to kind of distill those needs and respond to them with a set of recommendations, both for repositories and for the publisher / editorial slide. But what we're seeing right now is that it's journal by journal, and with respect to the heterogeneity of policies and procedures and workflows. And I don't know that there is one size fits all for a solution, but we're certainly going to be socializing the challenges and the expectations a lot on both sides, which I think will go a long way in alleviating or at least ameliorating this issue. We are scheduled to wrap up in May and have our set of recommendations for review through RDA. And let's see, anything else? Anything else you guys think I should put in there? Leslie, am I missing anything?
No, I think I just reinforces I'm part of that working group as well.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And Natalie
no.
Brea from University of Arizona and Matthew Wark from Taylor and Francis. Everybody has been great. I think the challenge of taking so long is because the process of IRB, the Institutional Review Board, that took a long time. And then because it's so tightly scoped with an IRB statement, only the chairs are doing the heavy lift of the interviews, and it's all volunteer work. So it's been taking us a lot longer than we thought, but we're really close to getting done. And we have a set of repositories that were disciplinary. We have a set of both publishers and editors from a wide array of academic geoscience journals. And so we'll hopefully have results to share the next RDA.
But I don't think it's just the IRB process that slowed it down. It was an absolute eye-opener to me when at one of our meetings, one of the publishers sort of stood up and said, "Oh, you do realise we kind of have individual policies for each journal, because each journal comes from a society and each journal is doing it differently." And I think that's been the key thing to me is as we talk about the quick DOIs you get from a generalist repository, and then the more, as Danny said, the extra effort that the domain repositories have to put in to do this. But then to understand that over and above that, each journal has its own policy. It's really been an eye-opener to me as just how complex this whole process is.
And to your point,
go ahead. Go on.
To your point, the societies and their connections with the journals ended up being a player that we weren't initially considering, and that have a lot of influence in this sphere. And so that was new. And now, that directed us to target some different editors and journals. So, Shelley.
I was, well, you guys, that was great. I wanted to redirect us. So one of us typed a really interesting a lack of evidence for ROI on open data sharing. And there are folks trying to figure out open science monitoring initiative and trying to figure out those measurements. I'm not sure who wrote this. You don't have to come clean. It's okay. That's what you're saying makes sense. But there is an opportunity that I'd like to put out there, and kind of looking at my my co-chairs and also thinking about Bobby, our fellow. AGU has the numbers on, because we have a policy that we've reinforced on requiring data citation in the paper. So now around 85% of all of our publications in 2025 have a data citation. Now, you all know, we walked this through. Is the data in the best place it can be? No. Is all the data being cited? Don't know. But it would be really interesting to pull those numbers and maybe explore some of that. One that I think would be super valuable is the citation bump. The paper gets a bump. We have enough evidence now to demonstrate that when a researcher cites their data, their own paper gets a citation bump. That's huge. That's a big motivator for researchers, and you don't even have to buy into all of the open data sharing. People will do it just to get the bump. So that's a nice leverage point. I'm not saying it's the best leverage point. I'm just saying it's a nice leverage point. But it might also be interesting to explore other ways to look at that data. Our folks that we've had a number of folks in the AGU publications that have run papers statistically demonstrating, for instance, male-female, different kinds of diversity. But those folks are currently not focused on that right now. So it's an opportunity. We could talk to our pubs folks and do a paper with this team. I don't know if there's an interest.
Okay, well, I'm looking at the time. I'm just wondering whether we can decide on what our 3 key takeaways are, because we've jumped around a lot during this. And as you know, UNICEF, we have a report back on all the sessions where each session says what their 3 key takeaways are. So I was just wondering whether people would like to take a stab at what you think they are from this session. And we'd really like to hear from the people to whom this is totally new. You've never been to one of our sessions before or even thought about it. So please feel free to type something in there. Okay, so we've got the first one. The outcomes for the SWOT need further discussion. Who wants to have a go at what the second one would be?
Everybody's quiet while we watch someone type. Isn't this great? It's like waiting on bated breath. So I'd love to once we analyze the SWOT analysis, right? The outcomes of the analysis need further discussion. Yes, I love that one. Who wrote that one in there? Please. And please reach out on the website if there's a link to join through RDA if you'd like to be a part of this. So is there, once we analyze this and have the discussion, is there a hope or an outcome of that final analysis? Like, can Coptis use this to sort of prioritize its future activities? Or again, hate to see this great in-depth kind of analysis of the wonderful output here and not do anything with it.
I mean, to me, the outcomes of this analysis kind of set strategy and for Coptis in the nearer future.
So before we go up, is been a lot of. It's amazing. 21 have stayed. I think we got up to 24 at one stage. So it's amazing we still here, but we haven't heard from everyone. So put your hand up if you'd just like to make one last comment. Oh, okay. Go ahead, please, Althea.
Hi, I'm new here. I have a little bit of experience with repositories. I worked for the Arctic Data Center at NCEAS for a year as a fellow. I'm currently a data scientist, and I would like to bring a little bit of perspective about students and their experiences with learning how to be a researcher and their mentors and how they come across data archiving or data publishing. And it's a messy process. And I think it depends on the university you're at, the department that you're in, and whether your advisor values that time spent on curating and publishing data. But I had two close friends in the geosciences at Berkeley, and I, as a open science data scientist, encouraged one of my good friends and tried to help her along the way whenever she needed help to publish her data. And ultimately, it became a huge burden, and she became very flustered, and she was extremely self-conscious about putting her data out there. And publishing it on Zenodo along with her software seemed like a much more comfortable route for her, and that's what she ended up doing. Got the DOI, linked it with her GitHub repo, and I guess I was very struck by the emotional side of it and how much of a barrier that was, and how little support she was getting from her advisor to spend that extra time to fill out full metadata and have the data published. So I think looking backwards to like the root of how we learn to do research and looking at that and really looking at opportunities to integrate data publishing as a part of the scientific workflow and have that research product be, ultimately in the long term, it may be more valuable than a publication. But looking at the opportunities to educate new researchers rather than try to change the minds and pathways, workflows of older faculty that might not be as flexible. So I just want to put in a plug for the graduate students, and that's the future.
If I could go first, Shelley, I'd just like to say I had a wonderful experience recently at the repository I work with, which is a HBC for really large data sets. And one researcher has worked with us to do the whole thing, like from her initial data sets, which I kid you not are about 40 terabytes, through to this, which went into our repository, to the snippets that go with the publication, which are in the institutional repository. And she just said at the end of it, because this has been going on for quite a while, oh, phew, I can really see the value in what I have done now, because, my whole process and the foundational data that she collected in New Zealand in the field is there for future research. But, yeah, as you say, people are not being given the time by their supervisors to do it. Okay, so Shelley, have you a quick comment, because we've got a couple more slides to go through yet.
Yeah, so Danny actually foreshadowed. We have a project, Natalie Rea and Danny Kincaid and I, NSF funded grant, and we're working directly with section leaders. So yes, the postdoc, the graduate student, yes, completely support the prior speaker, but we're also hitting it in the the heart of where the disciplines are talking and working, and going into the sections AGU, EGU, and JPGU to actually have those conversations about the value of working with domain repositories and such. So if you are in the world of oceans, hydrology, or seismology, Danny and I would really love it if you let us know that you might be interested in either paying attention or helping, or whatever level you want. Just pop a note. I'll put Danny, if you put your email, I'll put my email. We would value having you in the world that stay connected. So that would be great. All right, I'll get the slides back up.
Yeah, back to the slides. We took two hunches in preparing this session, which is firstly why we got Kirsten to give the background and the introduction. We've done our 3 takeaways. Next slide. I just want to briefly let you know, could you go to my next slide? Just so you are aware of the CopDesk cluster, we're probably unique in ESIP in that we actually run 2 parallel sessions. we do actually have interest from Europe. So the first Wednesday of the month is kind of the US friendly. And then the second, first Thursday of each month, we repeat the meeting. We are a diverse group with many interests. We've also created this potential meeting topics list, which is in the notes. And so we invite people to put in what you've got. For our February meeting, we will be just revisiting the focus key areas, and I think we've got our marching orders to review all the wonderful information you've provided with us. So again, if you're on the CopDesk mailing list, Zoe, are you still here? Could you put the link to how you get onto the CopDesk mailing list?
I can. I actually don't know if I know that.
Okay.
But maybe Bobby, I'll find it and drop it in chat. 1 second.
Okay. All right. So just our plans for the year. We're aiming high. Now we have our wonderful community fellow on board to help us and organising it. And we will also hold splinter meetings, town halls, EGU, AGU. And we do, like we're doing this in chemistry is not necessarily a CopDesk activity, but we're looking to doing editors roundtables at domain-specific conferences. I know the seismologists are starting to think towards doing that as well. So that's giving you a heads up on what we're going to do for the rest of the year in this cluster. Please come along. Does anyone have any comments on our meetings or our cluster?
And the mailing list has been posted in chat.
Yeah, thanks very much, Zoe. Okay, well, I think you're on next, Shelley. Oh, there. Yeah, that's the 5 key areas which we, and again, in view of what's on the notes that you've put in the SWOT analysis, we'll probably be reviewing these because they are the notes that the key areas that we've had ever since, 2014. So just trying to make our next meeting exciting so you'll come along. Okay. Over to you, Shelley.
Check. Does anybody, I don't know that we answered every single question that was in the list. Just double checking. Showcase this afternoon. Oh, Zoe's letting us know it's coming up. And we have some resources. Okay, fantastic. Sean did ask to join. And I think, Sean, you wanted to have maybe a specific conversation. So I did share with you the emails of the co-chairs. We're certainly delighted to get your thoughts on that. This has been fantastic. You've all had such incredible contributions. As Leslie was saying, the SWOT analysis, we weren't quite sure how it would go. Carl did bring up one of our worries was what your point of view you would take. You know what, you jumped in anyway. I think it's all very relevant to the kind of thing that Coptis is very interested in. It can seem really difficult to try to solve problems when you're combining a publisher and the broad research community at an international or national level. But I hope from this exercise, when you saw some of the opportunities and strengths in that list, there are a number of things that are smaller that any one person or a group can do and make a difference. And culture change is one person at a time. It's really important to remember that, those graduate students that are hungry to figure out how to do what is necessary, the stucky postdoc who ends up doing all the data curation based on whatever information they can find, the more we support them, the more we can provide them with the information that they need to do their best support the data the best way they can for their research workflow is going to make a difference. It'll make a difference by an individual, and then it'll make a difference by the folks that they help to support as well. So thank you all for coming.
I would
go ahead, Kirsten.
do a bit of a back to the beginning, and that is the connection with the publishers. And, who is on here today or has been on today who is a publisher or an editor? Not that many. And we need to make sure that we somehow bring the editors and publishers back into the discussion. And I hope that, our synthesis of all this input can give us, some material to connect back with the publishers as well. We do need some ideas from all of you how to bring more editors and publishers to the meetings that we hold. That is to me a major concern, because Coptis is all about the connection between the repositories, funders, and the publishing world. So maybe if you have ideas, the document is clearly a good place to leave it. Yep, I think that leaves us with 2 minutes, right? And yeah, thanks everybody. Hope you enjoy the rest of the ESIP Winter Meeting 2026. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for coming. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate all the information you've given us. And looking forward to seeing you in the first week of February.